Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, HOD sir.
Sir.
A very good morning to one and all. I welcome you all to day 3 of FDP on potential research areas in mechanical engineering organized by Vignan Institute of Technology and Science. This is N. Venkateshwarlu, co-convener. I am pleased to invite today's honorable speaker, Dr. K. Karunamurthy Garu. Sir graduated from Shastra University, a master's degree from Pondicherry Engineering College, and a PhD from Anna University, Chennai. He started his career as a design engineer at Pechner Consulting Engineers, subsequently a marine engineer in the Shipping Corporation of India for 4.5 years. He served as a faculty member for 18 years at renowned technological universities such as Shastra and SRM, and presently holding the position of Associate Professor in the School of Mechanical Engineering at Vellore Institute of Technology, Chennai. His research areas include enhanced heat transfer, nanotechnology, thermal energy storage, IC engines, and solar energy. He has published 20 technical manuscripts in international journals, 11 articles in international conferences, and 18 papers in national conferences. He has convened 7 national conferences and workshops and reviewer for 9 peer-reviewed international journals, and presently Sir guiding 4 PhD research scholars. He is a life member at Indian Welding Society and Tribological Society of India and Indian Society for Technical Education. He is conservant with various mechanical engineering courses, and to help the student community, he published various YouTube video lectures related to heat transfer, turbo machines, operation research, and power plant of engineering. And he is a hardcore academician and well human being. His academic and research approaches are definitely helpful for the teaching fraternity and especially for young research scholars. With these few words, I invite Dr. K. Karunamurthy Garu to this FDP, and I request him to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, good morning. Dear Dr. Leela Prasad, HOD of Mechanical Engineering, Dr. Venkateshwarlu, Senior Most Faculty in the Mechanical Department, and Dr. Singaravelu and other faculty members of Vignan Institute of Technology, and dear attendees. Without further delay, let me get into the topic. So in today's topic, we are going to discuss about carbon capture and storage for sustainable development. And especially this topic we are discussing during this COVID pandemic. This COVID pandemic is because of our human mankind is not in line with the nature. That is why this Wuhan virus has spread, and we are facing the problem. So this topic is more relevant because this is in order to protect the environment, we are talking about this topic. Okay. So whatever technology that we do today, that requires energy, and it is going to provide some output. Apart from that, some amount of disadvantage will be there. We don't have any technology without any disadvantage. So let us say to propel the society, we require energy, and for producing energy, we have power plants, and these power plants are also polluting the environment. So because of the pollution or degradation of the environment, we face many problems, right? So this topic is more relevant for today's pandemic. So I'll get into the topic right now. The overall presentation is like this. Let us start with the power sector. The reason for starting with power sector is that the amount of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere is mainly because of the power sector and transport sector, right? So let us get into the power sector. We'll start with the global perspective and with the national perspective. Then we'll discuss about the contributors of CO2 emission and what is carbon cycle. Then subsequently, we'll be discussing about what is flue gas cleaning system. Then we'll go to the carbon capture and storage. What is carbon capture and storage? Why it is necessary? And in which industrial sector it is relevant? and how to adopt this carbon capture and storage. When I talk about carbon capture, there are basically three methods available. One we call it as absorption method, other one is adsorption method. Then the third method is membrane separation to capture the carbon from the flue gas. And after capturing the carbon, we have to store them. So what are the various methods available for storing the carbon? And finally, we will discuss about a feasibility study which we have conducted at the NLC India power plant at Barsingsar power station of Rajasthan. And we will be concluding, right? So coming to the power sector at the global status, according to United Nations, there are 17 sustainable development goals are there, which is to be achieved in 2030, and it has been agreed by the 195 member countries of the United Nations, right? In that, the sustainable development goal so the sustainable development goal number 7 and 13 are more relevant. Sustainable development goal number 7 refers to the affordable and clean energy. To this sustainable development number goal 7, it states the objective of this sustainable development goal 7 is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable and modern energy for all. According to International Energy Agency, there are almost 850 million people around the world without any electricity access. And the one more objective of the Sustainable Development Goal number 7 is to achieve global primary energy intensity less than 3%. The global primary energy intensity is nothing but amount of energy required for achieving unit gross domestic product. For any nation, we used to have gross domestic product, GDP. For unit GDP, what is the amount of energy that we have to spend to get 1 unit of GDP? That parameter we call it as global primary energy intensity. So that value should be less than 3%. These are the objectives of Sustainable Development Goal number 7. This is relevant to energy. And there is one more Sustainable Development Goal which is relevant to our today's topic, that is climate action. So according to this Sustainable Development Goal number 13, it is necessary to take urgent action to combat the climate change and its impacts. By 2030, the emission objective should be less than 2 degrees C. Of the atmospheric temperature should not go beyond 2 degrees C, and moreover, they want to maintain less than 1.5 degrees C. That is one of the urgent requirement of United Nations. So there are two Sustainable Development Goals relevant to today's topics according to United Nations. One is Sustainable Development Goal number 7 and another one is Sustainable Development Goal number 13. Now let us get into the power sector, global status of the power sector. There is an organization called World Energy Council. They rank the nations across the globe based on a parameter called Energy Trilemma Index. This Energy Trilemma Index is achieved by considering 3 dimensions, namely energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability. Energy security is providing electric power to everyone, to all citizens of the nation. That is energy security. And energy equity refers to providing the energy at affordable price. That is energy equity. Even though the electricity boards or the government utilities are providing the energy, it should be affordable for the citizen. That is the second dimension of Energy Trilemma Index. And the third dimension is providing energy and providing at affordable price. Everything should be rooted through environmental sustainability. Without degrading the environment, all this has to be carried out. This is similar to our Indian mythology. In Indian mythology, we say like Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. This we know very well. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Artha means getting the materials for our life. Kama means receiving the pleasure for our life. And our final ultimate objective is to attain the moksha. All these things, all these three, like getting the materialistic thing and getting the pleasure and achieving the moksha, everything should be rooted through dharma. So the foundation is dharma. Similar to that, to provide energy security and energy equity to the citizens of the nation, it is mandatory to have environmental sustainability. So this is according to World Energy Council. Now I'll play a small video. This is about world energy for 4 minutes. I'll share the video now. Is it audible?
Peak oil is no longer a concern. But this simple anxiety has been replaced by a myriad issues and complex challenges. With unconventional resources, the oil endowment has quadrupled. We also see that while significant, the development of renewables globally, excluding large hydro, has to date been slower than expected. By 2050, we will see a doubling of energy demand, with the share of electricity increasing faster than primary energy supply. According to our unique explorative scenarios, renewables, especially solar energy, could register the highest growth, contributing between 20% and 30% to the global energy mix. But fossil fuels will, on current trend, remain the dominant resource to 2050. During the same period, whether in the decentralized jazz scenario or the more orchestrated symphony scenario, greenhouse gas emissions could double or even quadruple by 2050 compared to 1990 levels, with the potential to expose our energy infrastructure to disasters. The lack of a climate framework is one of the issues that keeps global energy leaders most awake at night. But energy prices and high associated volatility have become more critical in the absence of a clear path for the future of CO2 prices. Accelerated change in policy, technological innovation, and consumer expectations are making energy markets increasingly complex. Current business models struggle to guarantee both competitiveness and affordable energy in the future, while political and regulatory risks threaten investment in infrastructure and innovation. Energy efficiency remains an action priority, but requires a longer-term approach to financing. The low-hanging fruit may have been picked. We now need additional demand-side investments, innovation, incentives, and stronger technical standards to significantly reduce the world's energy intensity. We will need to increase our efforts to provide access to energy for the world's growing population. Otherwise, up to 530 million people could still lack access to even basic forms of energy in 2050. This restricts life chances, opportunities, and prosperity. As we look to identify the sound, stable policies that will address these issues and catalyze investment towards sustainable energy solutions, we need to ask a number of questions. What is our plan B? What might the business and policy implications be? How can we mobilize the necessary capital for this transition? The World Energy Council believes that we can only find suitable solutions and achieve sustainable energy for all by addressing what we call the energy trilemma, the triple challenge of providing secure, affordable, and environmentally sensitive energy. Each dimension is vital to the development and prosperity of a country, but perspectives on the urgency of the pillars vary, as exposed by our Trilemma and Energy Sustainability Index, which ranks countries in terms of their ability to provide the robust energy and climate policies needed for a sustainable energy system, nationally, regionally, and globally. We live in a time of increasing uncertainties, extraordinary changes, and hard choices. Ultimately, as the world seeks to redefine a resilient and sustainable energy system, we will have to ask ourselves, how must today's policies, markets, and technologies change to deliver tomorrow's sustainable energy?
So that is from World Energy Council. So according to World Energy Council, so there are three parameters to rank any nation. So these are the top 10 nations. Switzerland being number 1 based on the Energy Trilemma Index. And coming to our India, India ranks 109. India is at the 109th position based on the Energy Trilemma Index. And there is one more organization named Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st century. They concentrate more on renewable energy, and according to their global status report, still across the globe, to meet the power demand, they depend upon thermal power. Almost 80% of the total power demand is met by thermal power. So when I say thermal power, then it also pollutes the environment. Okay. So this is the global status. And coming to the Indian perspective, the total amount of total installed capacity of the power plant in India is 3,70,106 megawatt. This is as on 31st March 2020. This is from Ministry of Power. And there are 3 players with reference to power plant in India. One we call it as central government power plants, other one is state government power plant, and the third one is the private players. Now private players are dominating. Here you can see almost 46.8% of the total power produced in India is by the private players. And the national perspective of power with reference to the fuel source, here you can see, like in India, 62.3% of the power generation is through thermal. Across the globe, it is almost equal to 80%, whereas in India, it is 62.3%. Still, thermal power is dominating. And modern renewables come to around 23.5%, and hydroelectric come to 12.35%. So this is in India. So in India also, thermal power plants are dominating. So from this, what do we observe is that energy is the fundamental necessity for propelling the society. For the development of the society, energy is the responsible. And at present, most of the energy demand is met from the hydrocarbon fuels in the power plants. And we want energy that is obtained from the power plant for our development, growth, or progress of the mankind. We want electric power. So that is done by the power plants. Even though it provides electricity, it also pollutes the environment. That is the topic which we are going to discuss today. How to mitigate this CO2 emission. That is the idea. The contributors of CO2 emission are, there are 2 major contributors. One is the power sector, other one is the transportation sector. The power sector, it contributes almost 66.66% of the total emission or the total CO2 emitted into the atmosphere. It is contributed by power sector. This is according to International Energy Agency. And if you compare Indian power plant and a power plant in US, for generating 1 kilowatt hour of power, in US, they emit 453 grams of CO2. Whereas in India, to generate 1 kilowatt hour of power, we are emitting almost 900 to 950 grams of CO2. So which is almost double, which means that we are using poor grade coal compared to power plant in US, and the efficiency of our power plants is also less. That is why we are emitting more amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. And the other second major contributor for CO2 emission is by the transportation sector. It contributes to almost 24%. So totally it comes to almost 90%, and remaining 10% is by the heavy industries. So the major contributors for CO2 emission into the atmosphere is power plant and the transportation sector, and this CO2 is remaining in the atmosphere. When the CO2 remains in the atmosphere, what will happen is that part of the CO2 will be absorbed by the ocean. Almost 30% of the CO2 emitted is absorbed by the ocean, and 25% is being absorbed by the plants, that is in the forest, as well as all other biological plants. It absorbs CO2. And beyond this, still almost 45% of the CO2 remains in the atmosphere. So that is the major concern now. How to handle this? So now what will happen if the CO2 level is very high in the atmosphere, right? So this complete phenomenon we call it as a carbon cycle. So when the CO2 level is very high in the atmosphere, then what will happen is like it affects the life in the land, and it also affects the marine life. Both are being affected. In the land, if you see, the excess carbon in the atmosphere, because of the presence of more amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, it will increase the temperature of the planet, our Earth. So Earth's temperature will increase because the CO2 that is emitted is a greenhouse gas. So we know the greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse will allow the light to enter, whereas when the sunlight enters into the Earth and hits the Earth's surface, it will become infrared. For infrared, these greenhouse gases are opaque. It will not allow the infrared rays to leave the Earth. That means it will be trapped inside. So as a result, the atmosphere temperature increases, right? And also this increased CO2, what it will do, it is increasing the temperature. When the atmospheric temperature increases, then the water that is present in the water bodies like sea, river, lake, pond, from all these places, the water, it will evaporate. When the water evaporates, the amount of water vapor that can be held by the atmosphere, that depends upon the temperature. If the temperature of the atmospheric air increases, then it can hold more amount of water vapor, right? So at higher temperature, more amount of water vapor will be present in the atmospheric air because the rate of evaporation from the water bodies is faster. So more amount of water is evaporating, and this evaporated water is present in the atmospheric air. So as the moisture content of the air increases, its humidity increases, right? And as the temperature of the atmosphere increases, what will happen is that the summer season, it will increase. In Earth, the summer time period will increase. So even though we say like increase in temperature and increase in water level in the air is good for the plant, but as the summer season increases, what will happen is that the plants will be subjected to a lot of stress, because during summer season, the soil is dry and the soil is having less amount of water. So plants are being starved for water. So when it is starving and it is dry, it is subjected to a lot of stress. Because of this stress, what will happen, since the plants are dry, it is susceptible to forest fire. And also it will be affected by the insects, right? So this is the major problem for the life in the land, especially for the flora. And as the temperature increases, what will happen? The glaciers melts and the seawater level increases, and the amount of area, surface area of the earth available for land, it will decrease. So these are the problems with reference to amount of CO2 emission into the atmosphere for the life in land. Coming to the marine life. In the marine life, the oceans takes almost 30% of the CO2 emitted. And when the CO2 gets dissolved into the seawater, it will form, it will try to form carbonic acid, right? When the CO2 is being absorbed by the seawater, it will form carbonic acid. The marine life such as corals, this is coral, this is conch shell, this is mussels, and this is an oyster. All these marine lives are having a protective layer made up of calcium, right? And this is formed from carbonate ions, which is present in the ocean, right? As this CO2 level increases, more amount of CO2 is getting dissolved in the ocean. What will happen is that this carbonic acid, it will react with the carbonate ion and it will form bicarbonate. That means less amount of carbonate ion will be available for these plants to form the shell. So as a result, what will happen? So the shell will be very thin, and moreover, the carbonic acid, it will also try to dissolve this calcium carbonate, which is the shell of this marine life, and this shell will become very weak and thin, and this marine life is also affected. So as the CO2 level increases, it affects the life in land as well as it affects the life in the sea. So how to control this? Now let us consider a power plant, thermal power plant based on coal as the fuel. So to run the power plant, we will be supplying coal as fuel, and we have to supply air for combustion. And after combustion, coal will be leaving as ash, and that will be disposed. And the products of combustion is going to leave as flue gas. So this flue gas contains a lot of pollutants. Basically, there are two different types of pollutants. One we call it as particulate matter, and other one we call it as the gaseous pollutant. So there are two different types of pollutants available in the flue gas. Now we have to concentrate with respect to the pollutants coming out from the thermal power plant. To handle the particulate matter, there are two technologies available. One is called as a baghouse filter, and the other one is the electrostatic precipitator. In Olden days we used to have baghouse filter, and these days we have latest technology, which is electrostatic precipitator, which will remove almost 99.99% of the particulate matter. So which is highly efficient method of removing particulate matter. Coming to the gaseous pollutants, the flue gas contains CO2, CO, SOx, NOx. These are the gases which are available in the flue gas. So now all this has to be removed before it is being led to the surrounding. The technology that is involved in the removing the particulate matter and gaseous pollutants from the flue gas is what we call as scrubber technology. And in today's session, we are going to discuss about how to capture CO2 from the flue gas. Right. So coming to the carbon capture. So according to United Nations, recently in 2015, an agreement has been signed at Paris, which we call as Paris Agreement. This agreement says that environment temperature should not go beyond 1.5 degrees C. At the worst case, it can increase by 2 degrees C. Beyond that, it should not go. Right? And this Paris Agreement also says that we should be ready to adapt to the environment with a higher temperature. Like let us say if it is going to increase by 1.5 degrees C surrounding temperature, we should be ready to adapt to the situation, and we should not, our food production should not be affected. And moreover, all the nations should make a financial flow for achieving this, mitigating the CO2. Right? CO2 emission mitigation has to be carried out, for which the nation has to provide sufficient finance. So the bottom line of the Paris Climate Agreement is that it deals with greenhouse gas emission, it deals with the mitigation of greenhouse gas emission, and in case if the temperature increases by 1.5 degree or 2 degrees C at the worst case, we should be ready to adapt, and there should be finance available for mitigating the greenhouse gas emission. And their objective is that by 2020 we should have zero greenhouse gas emission to the atmosphere. So that is the objective of the Paris Agreement. So for that, we are coming into this carbon capture and storage. So throughout this, we are going to discuss about what is carbon capture and storage, why it is necessary, and which sector this is carried out or to be adopted, and how to achieve this carbon capture and storage. That is what we are going to discuss to protect the environment. So carbon capture and storage is a technology made by the man to extract the CO2 emissions and preventing the CO2 entering into the atmosphere. So this includes capturing the CO2, transporting the captured CO2, and then storing in a safe place. So all these three makes carbon capture and storage. Why it is necessary is that we want to protect our environment. We don't want to have any change in the climate. The temperature of the atmosphere should not increase. So to meet the climate change, it is mandatory to decarbonize our power plant, our transportation sector, and heavy industry by 2030. And by 2050, we want to completely have zero carbon emission. And we want to provide energy security, and we want to boost the economy of the nation. So that is why we go for this carbon capture and storage. And where it is to be implemented, it is to be implemented in the power sector, in the transportation sector, and in other heavy industry sectors. Now, how to carry out this? How to perform or how to achieve this carbon capture and storage? Basically, there are three ways by which we can do. One, we call it as post-combustion capture. That means like in the combustion chamber, we will be allowing the fuel and air to undergo combustion. After combustion, the products of combustion is going to leave. In the products of combustion, if you are going to remove CO2, then that we call it as post-combustion capture of CO2. Or during the combustion process itself, by altering the combustion reaction, you can control the formation of CO2. So that we call it as oxy-fuel combustion. Only these two topics we are going to discuss. Other option is that pre-combustion capture. That means like before combustion takes place, you have to remove the carbon. Like there are fuels other than coal, like take the case of hydrogen, which does not have any carbon. So if you are going to use such fuels, then CO2 emission will be completely zero. So in today's topic, we are going to discuss only post-combustion capture predominantly, and slightly we will discuss about oxy-fuel combustion, because we are using fossil fuel, which is nothing but hydrocarbon, That means it contains a lot of carbon. So when carbon undergoes combustion, CO2 is emitted, so which we want to prevent. So post combustion capture is like this. For combustion, we require fuel and oxygen. After combustion, it releases heat, and as a disadvantage, it also releases exhaust gas, which is nothing but the products of combustion. Right? From this products of combustion, we are going to remove the carbon dioxide. So post combustion capture involves the removal of carbon dioxide from the flue gas produced after the combustion of the fuel. So fuel and oxygen, which undergoes combustion, and the CO2 that is emitted to the atmosphere is captured. After capturing, the treated gas, which contains only nitrogen and water vapor, is led to the atmosphere, and the collected carbon is has to be stored. So this is the idea of post combustion capture. To achieve this post combustion capture of CO2, there are basically 5 methods available, right? Or we can say absorption method, adsorption method, membrane separation, and cryogenic separation. This cryogenic separation is not relevant to power plant or for transport sector, because like let us say if you want to purify the air, or if you want to extract oxygen from air, in such process we will be allowing the air to pass through very low temperature less than -150 degrees C, which we call it as cryogenic temperature. In that process, we also separate CO2, but this is very costly phenomenon, so we cannot suggest this method for power plant or for transport sector. So what we are going to discuss today is only the chemical absorption method, physical absorption method, membrane separation method, and adsorption method. These 4 methods we are going to discuss to capture CO2 from the exhaust gas. Coming to the chemical absorption method, this is a widely used method, right? For in most of the thermal power plants, this method is suitable, right? In this method, we used to have a tower called as absorber tower. Okay, this is the absorber tower where we will be allowing the flue gas from the power plant to pass through, and we will be supplying monomethylamine. This is a solvent which is supplied, and this solvent and flue gas, they will mix, and the CO2 present in the flue gas will get dissolved. After dissolving, this solvent, that is monomethylamine, which contains rich CO2, that is allowed to another column called stripper column or stripper tower. Here, when this solvent rich in CO2 is heated using steam, at high temperature, the CO2 will get separate from the solvent. So the separated CO2 is collected, and after collecting, now the solvent, after releasing the CO2, it is once again sent back to the absorber column for collecting the CO2 from here. So this process we call it as chemical absorption method. And for heating the stripper column, we will be supplying steam. This steam will be from the power plant. That means a part of the steam that is being produced from the boiler has to be tapped and sent to the your stripper column. So what will happen is that the total amount of steam available for power production in the turbine is going to come down. So if you are going to implement a coal capture and CO2 capture and storage system in the thermal power plant, then the total power production will come down. The net power output from the power plant will come down. So which we have to sacrifice in order to capture the CO2. Okay. So this chemical absorption method, this is very common in thermal power plant, very suitable for thermal power plant. And wherever the flue gas pressure is less, in the case of thermal power plant, coal-based thermal power plant, the flue gas pressure is less. If it is in the case of integrated gasifier combined cycle power plant, where we are going to use a gasifier, the pressure of the flue gas will be higher. In such cases, we cannot use chemical absorption methods. So chemical absorption methods are suitable for flue gas which is at low pressure. And compared to all other methods, this chemical absorption method is faster, right? And here the CO2 gets dissolved or it reacts with the solvent, that is monomethylamine. That is the most commonly used solvent. So it will undergo a chemical reaction and it will react with the solvent. The commonly used solvents are monomethylamine, potassium carbonate, and chilled ammonia. Among these 3, monomethylamine is widely used. And if you compare these three solvents, like potassium carbonate, chilled ammonia, and monomethylamine. So this monomethylamine for running the CCS plant, carbon capture and storage plant, to capture 1 gram mole of CO2, we have to spend 0.01572 kilowatt hour of power that is being produced. So this much amount of power we have to spend to capture the CO2 in the case of monomethylamine. If the solvent is going to be chilled ammonia, then compared to monomethylamine, it requires more power. It requires 0.021 kilowatt hour per gram mole of CO2 capture. And if you want to go for the potassium carbonate, then the system itself is completely different. So there we are going to use a system called integrated reforming combined cycle for capturing the CO2, right? And this has to be retrofitted, and the energy penalty compared to the other two solvents, it is less here. It will take only 0.0122 kilowatt hour per gram mole of CO2. So there are basically three solvents available, and most predominantly we'll be using monomethylamine. And coming to physical absorption method. So the difference between the chemical absorption and physical absorption method is that in the case of chemical absorption method, the solvent and the CO2 will react. Whereas in the case of physical absorption method, chemical reaction will not take place. So this physical absorption method is suitable for flue gas at higher pressure, right? Now let us say if you are going to have a power plant of integrated then this physical absorption method is more suitable. And this takes to almost 20 to 25% of the total power produced for running the CCS plant. So some of the commercially available physical absorption methods are listed here. We have some 4 methods. These are well proven physical absorption methods for capturing CO2 from the exhaust gas. And if you compare both physical and chemical solvents, physical absorption and chemical absorption, here you can see the selection of the method depends upon the pressure of the CO2 present in the flue gas, that the partial pressure of the CO2 present in the flue gas. In the case of physical solvent, if you see, as the partial pressure increases, the absorption capacity of the solvent increases. Whereas in the case of chemical solvent, as the partial pressure of the CO2 increases, the absorption capacity of the solvent increases to a certain extent, and beyond this, further increase in partial pressure will not help in the absorption capacity of the solvent. So for higher partial pressure, for the flue gas which contains higher partial pressure, we prefer physical absorption method. If the partial pressure is less, then we go for chemical absorption method. And the third method is membrane separation. So this is a third method that is followed. This is predominantly used for liquid fuel and gaseous fuels. In the power plant, if you are going to use liquid fuel and gaseous fuel, then this membrane separation method is suitable. In the case of membrane separation method, what we are trying to do is that this is the flue gas, untreated flue gas is this, which contains more amount of nitrogen and CO2. So now these are the major composition of the flue gas. When it is allowed to pass through a permeable membrane, CO2 has lesser diameter. If you see the kinetic diameter of the CO2, which is less than the nitrogen, so through this sieve, CO2 can pass through, whereas nitrogen is retained. So in the case of membrane separation method, the exhaust gas containing CO2, water vapor and nitrogen is allowed to pass through this membrane. And because of the kinetic diameter, CO2 contains less kinetic diameter, therefore it can easily pass through this membrane, leaving the nitrogen. So there is a parameter which defines the performance of the membrane, which we call it as selectivity, or it is also called as separation factor. So this parameter is will tell you the how good is the membrane, right? These are the various membranes available. So all these are all polymer membranes, cellulose acetate, polyamide, and these are some of the membranes available. If you see the selectivity or the separation factor, all the values of the separation factor are more than 20. So normally we say, like, if you select a membrane, if the separation factor is more than 20, we say that it is a good membrane. That is preferred. Okay, all these polymer based membranes are having selectivity or separation ratio more than 20. It is like when the flue gas passes through the membrane, after passing through the membrane, it contains some amount of CO2 and nitrogen. You consider that ratio divided by CO2 by nitrogen that is present before the membrane. That ratio is called as the selectivity ratio or separation factor. So that should be more than 20. So this is how we select the membrane for membranation separation method. So this membrane separation method, there are two ways by which we can do. One, they call it as molecular sieving, where the flue gas is allowed to pass through the membrane and the CO2 is removed, leaving behind the nitrogen. Other option is that we can have a membrane. One side of the membrane will be having a chemical absorbent like monomethylamine, and the other side of the membrane will be allowing the flue gas to pass through. This membrane has permeability. So CO2 has lesser kinetic diameter so that it will pass through and it will get dissolved in the chemical absorbent. Okay, so this we call it as amine facilitated transport. Other one we call it as molecular sieving. So basically we have two different methods among the membrane separation method itself. So membrane separation has advantages like it can perform at steady state, and there is no moving parts, and we have only modular construction, like a separate module will be there. Depending upon our requirement, we can increase the number of module, and this is applied successfully for separating CO2 from light hydrocarbon, means for petroleum fuel as well as for natural gas. That means this is ideal for liquid fuel and gaseous fuel. Liquid fuel is used in diesel power plant, gaseous fuel is used in gas turbine power plant. So for a diesel power plant and for gas turbine power plant, this membrane separation method is best. For a thermal power plant, we have to go for monomethylamine, chemical absorption method. However, in this application, the partial pressure of CO2 is much higher compared to thermal power plant. That is also a parameter. That is why we go for this membrane separation, because it requires certain amount of pressure difference. Only then the CO2 can permeate through the membrane. So the driving force for the membrane separation is the pressure, right? So the cost compared to your chemical absorption and physical absorption, the membrane separation method is not economical, it is costly. So the cost is much higher than the conventional monomethylamine separation method. Coming to the fourth method, so till now we have discussed about chemical absorption method, physical absorption method, membrane separation method for extracting CO2 from the flue gas, and the fourth method is adsorption method. In the adsorption method, we will be using chemicals like zeolite and activated carbon. These are used. So when you allow the flue gas to pass through a tower containing zeolite, this zeolite or the activated carbon will capture the CO2, leaving behind, leaving the treated gas to the atmosphere. Okay, so there will be a bed of activated carbon or zeolite, or both is also possible. So as the CO2 passes, it will get adsorbed in the solid activated carbon. Then, so this process happens continuously. We will be allowing the flue gas to pass through the activated carbon bed or a zeolite bed. So it is going to get absorbed and it reaches a saturation limit. That means beyond which it cannot hold the CO2. It cannot absorb the CO2. Under such conditions, what we have to do? We will stop supplying the flue gas to this your adsorption bed, and there will be two adsorption bed. One will be working, one will be standby. So the standby bed will be used subsequently when the saturated adsorption bed is undergoing maintenance. So then later we will be applying some pressure or we will increase the temperature to remove the CO2 from the adsorption tower. So here you can see the flue gas contains CO2, nitrogen and hydrogen. Initially water vapor is separated by condensation process. Then later in the adsorption tower, CO2 is removed. After removing the CO2, treated gas is led to the atmosphere, and CO2 that is collected is stored further. So here you can see, so there are two activated carbon bed. Let us say this is activated carbon bed 1, this is activated carbon bed 2. So both are in parallel. So we will allow the exhaust gas to pass through activated carbon bed number 1. That means this is working, this is standby. So after certain time period, what will happen? This will become saturated. So when the activated carbon bed number 1 is saturated, we will not allow the flue gas to pass through. Instead, we will allow the flue gas to pass through the activated carbon bed number 2. During that time period, we'll be having a valve, we'll shut the valve, and this will be undergoing maintenance, or we will be removing the CO2 that has been absorbed to the activated carbon from activated carbon bed number 1. Okay. So finally, after treating the exhaust gas, the CO2 free exhaust gas is left to the atmosphere. So here you can see the activated carbon bed, it will appear like this. So the exhaust gas is allowed to pass through this. Initially, water is condensed, water vapor present in the flue gas is condensed. Then CO2 get absorbed. So treated flue gas is leaving. That means which contains maximum amount of nitrogen, that is leaving. So later we will be applying pressure for removing the CO2 during maintenance, and the standby will be working, and after stopping the activated carbon bed number 1, that will be subjected to pressure for removing the adsorbed CO2. Okay, this is the phenomenon. So this is about post combustion capture, and I have told you that there is another method by which during the combustion process, when it is happening, we can control the amount of CO2 that is being emitted to the atmosphere by altering the combustion reaction. Now let us say this is the place where the combustion takes place. We are going to supply fuel and air. Here what we will do, we will not supply air directly. Instead, we will have a air separation unit, and pure oxygen is supplied. So oxygen extracted from the air is supplied for combustion. So when you supply oxygen and fuel, when you supply pure oxygen instead of air, then the combustion is perfect combustion takes place, clean combustion takes place. The amount of heat generated is going to be more. Since the amount of heat generated is more, then more amount of NOx will be formed. At higher temperature, NOx formation will be more. So what we will do, we will be having a recirculation of the CO2, right? So recirculation of the flue gas is done. Flue gas recirculation is done to reduce the temperature. Okay. So to control the temperature, flue gas recirculation is done in the case of oxy-fuel combustion. Thereby we control the temperature and we reduce the emission into the atmosphere. So till now we have discussed about carbon capture. Coming to the carbon storage methods, right? Whatever we have collected, that has to be stored. And when we store, it should be a safe place, and it should be environmentally sustainable. It should not leak from there. And the method that we are going to adopt should be economical. It should be cost effective for storing the CO2 that has been collected. So now the places where we are going to store the collected CO2 are listed here. One is saline formation. That means like the places where we have high saline groundwater. Some places we will have salt water in the ground. Such places can be selected for storing the CO2. And in the oil and natural gas reservoir, in the oil well, when we pump out the oil, that place will be empty. So there we can supply the collected CO2. So there also we have an advantage. Once we get into that oil and natural gas reservoir for storing the CO2, I'll tell you what is the advantage there. And after removing the coal, right? Let us say you have a coal mine. That mine is completely exploited. We have the coal mine has depleted. The further mining of coal is not possible from that place. In such places, we can dump the CO2 that has been collected. And there are other two options also. In organic rich shale, right? This is in the volcanic region, wherever we have volcano, the molten lava will be coming out. This molten lava, we call it as basalt. So this basalt is similar to the activated carbon, which will absorb the CO2. That is also possible. And other regions, some places where the muddy sedimentary rocks are there, which we call as shale. This shale is also good in absorbing the CO2. So these are some of the places where we can, the collected CO2 can be stored. Now coming to this storage area, one by one we'll discuss. This carbon storage is not a new concept. So there are huge CO2 storage sites are available in Norway as well as in Canada. At these sites, CO2 is injected for many years, and they are storing almost 1 million metric tons of CO2 every year. So huge storage sites are available. Now recently other nations like China, Australia, and nations from Europe, they are also into this carbon storage, and there are almost 200 CO2 capture and storage plants are operating. Huge plants are operating worldwide. And coming to the various methods of storage, coming to the saline formation, as I have told you, like in some places the groundwater is salty water is available, or saline water is available. So now what we can do is that, so this groundwater, salt water, which is having TDS more than 10,000 ppm, in such places we can dig a well, and we can extract this saline water, which can be treated. Saline water can be treated by using a demineralization plant. After treatment, that water can be used for driving a thermal power plant, because for thermal power plant you require water. Steam is the working medium. So we get the water from this source, this saline source, treat this using DM plant, demineralization plant, allow the water to steam formation, and run the power plant to produce power. Now this power plant is going to emit CO2. The CO2 that is being emitted by the power plant is captured using CCS technology, and it is sent back to the ground. So when you send back the pressurized CO2 into the ground, the region that is empty because of extracting the salt water, that can be occupied by the CO2. And the water after treating from the DM plant, we are using for running the power plant, and the same and a certain amount of water can be used for other domestic purpose also. So this is an area where we can store the captured carbon, so in the groundwater which is salty in nature. And other are in the case of an oil well. Consider this is an oil well. From here we are extracting the crude oil, and further it is processed, and the petroleum products are being formed. Now when you start extracting the crude oil from here, inside this empty space will be available. That space can be used for storing the CO2. So here you can see we are pumping the CO2 that is being collected into the ground, where the CO2, the crude oil extraction is being carried out. Now the one more advantage with storing CO2 at this site is that when we are pumping the CO2, pressurized CO2, it will try to push the crude oil that is available here. Now let us say if you don't pump CO2, the amount of crude oil that we are going to extract is going to be less. Now because of the pressurized CO2 that is entering into this region, it will try to push the crude oil that is present here. So this phenomenon we call it as enhanced recovery of oil and gas, right? So this will enhance this CO2 when we are going to pump in. It is going to push the crude oil, and thereby it is going to enhance, and more amount of oil can be recovered from this site. Okay. So this is one area where we can store the captured CO2. And the other region is unminable coal mines. After extracting the coal from the mine, so let us say it is a closed mine, right? So these places are from where we have extracted already the coal. So these are empty volume that is available, where we are going to allow the CO2 captured, and we are going to inject the CO2 into these places. So during injection, what will happen? After recovering the coal, there will be methane present, right? So this methane can be recovered. Again, methane is also a fuel. We can recover. So when you supply the CO2 inside, whatever methane that is present in the coal bed, so this we call it as enhanced coal bed methane recovery system. So when we pump the CO2 inside, pressurized CO2, when you inject into this region, the methane that is present in the coal bed, that can be extracted. So we can extract methane from the coal bed by injecting CO2. So this is another region. So initially we started with saline formation, where groundwater is salty water. There we can store, and we can store in the oil well after extracting the crude oil, and we can store in the unminable coal mines. And one more option is basalt formations. Basalt formation is nothing but in the volcanic region. What will happen when the volcano erupts? The molten lava, it will try to flow. It will come out, and it will be flowing over the surface of the earth. So this we call it as basalt. Basalt is nothing but the molten lava. So this forms a thick layer of basalt, right? And this basalt is suitable for storing the CO2. Okay. If you see the property of the basalt, this is similar to activated carbon. That is like this contains magnesium and calcium. This basalt contains magnesium and calcium. So when you inject the CO2, this CO2 will react with the magnesium and calcium. It will form carbonate. It will form calcite and dolomite. Dolomite and calcite are being formed, and it is permanently stored. So CO2 is locked permanently in the basalt. So this is the region where we can store CO2. And the other option is going for organic shale formation. Shale is nothing but this is sedimentary rock with mud. So this mud is composed. This consists of a mix of flakes of clay minerals and tiny fragments of other minerals, which are quartz and calcite. So this shale has a property of absorbing the CO2. So this is also another place where we can store the CO2. So coming to the feasibility study, this is a feasibility study which we have carried out at NLC India Limited. Few of our BTech students, they did a project at NLC India Limited. So NLC India Limited is, it is an Indian power plant, and they are very much conscious about the environmental degradation. So they take various, our Indian power plants are taking various measures to protect the environment by reducing the CO2 that is being emitted. So Indian power plants are looking for different options of decreasing the CO2 emission, and they are also looking for various options of utilizing the renewable energy sources. So NLC is a Navaratna company which is coming under Ministry of Coal. They have their power plants located at Neyveli and Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu, and at Barsingsar in Rajasthan, at Talabira at Odisha, and at Ghatampur in UP. So these are the places at which NLC is having power plants. And there the NLC power plants are operated on lignite. NLC is nothing but Neyveli Lignite Corporation. So it operates on lignite. They are also having coal-based power plants. They import coal and they run the power plant. And these days they are into solar and wind also. And they are also acquired some of the power plants. And the total amount of power that is being produced by NLC is 14,971 megawatt, which includes all the power plants across India. So in the case of this Barsingsar power station of NLC, they were using coal for running the thermal power plant, and they produce electric power as output. And after burning the coal, ash gets deposited, that is being disposed, and the flue gas that is leaving the thermal power plant that contains CO2. So now to remove that CO2, we have to go for carbon capture and storage plant. CCS plant has to be incorporated. Thereby, we can allow the CO2 free flue gas, that is treated flue gas, into the atmosphere. But to drive this carbon capture and storage plant, we require electric power or we require steam. If it is a chemical absorption system, then we have to supply steam to the reboiler. So certain amount of power has to be supplied to drive the CCS. Thereby, the net power output is going to decrease. If you don't have a CCS, then power output will be more. By incorporating CCS, we are going to spend some amount of power. So net power output of the power plant is going to come down. So finally, the collected carbon has to be transported and stored. This is the idea. So for this, what we did, this Barsingsar power station of NLC, it contains 2 units of 125 megawatt thermal power plant with the circulating fluidized bed combustion technology. The total power generated by this power plant is used for the to meet the power of state of Rajasthan. So this Barsingsar power plant utilizes coal from the Barsingsar mine and also from one more mine called Halda mine. There are 2 mines which are closer to this power plant. Barsingsar mine is at a distance of 4.4 kilometers, whereas Halda mine is located at a distance of 32 kilometers away from the power station. The following parameters we have calculated in our study. The cost of electricity after incorporating this CCS unit, and the net power output after incorporating CCS, because if you incorporate a CCS in the thermal power plant, net power output will come down. So what is that net power output that will be available if you are going to utilize, if you are going to retrofit the CCS plant with the power plant? And we have also identified some of the sites for carbon sequestration, that means for carbon storage. And to achieve this, what we did is that we have used a software named Integrated Environment Control Module. This is a software developed by Carnegie Mellon University, which is a free software, free source. Anybody can use. And we have downloaded this software, and we have approached NLC. We received data related to Barsingsar Power Station, and all those data we have fed into the software, and the software will provide you various solutions, right? And it will also tell you the how much amount of CO2 can be recovered, which method is suitable, and what is the cost of electricity after incorporating the CCS plant, how much cost we have to incur for going for this CCS plant. All those output parameters can be obtained from the ICM software. So this is the input which we have provided. We received the input from the Barsingsar Power Station, which is a 250 megawatt power plant, 2 into 125 megawatt, 2 units of 125 megawatt. And it is a subcritical boiler. It's a tangential firing boiler. Boiler efficiency is around 80%. Fuel used is lignite. And the fuel is received from the Barsingsar mine as well as from the Halda mines. And the property of the coal is listed here. Its calorific value, excess air supplied, all those parameters are listed here. Now, by providing this input parameter to the IECM software, Integrated Environment Control Module, we received the output like this. It has provided a layout for installing the carbon capture and storage plant. It has given us what is the amount of CO2 which we can capture, how much amount of caustic, the sodium hydroxide has to be supplied, all other parameters, how much amount of steam has to be tapped from the boiler or running the reboiler. So all these parameters were given. So the software has suggested to go for chemical absorption method. The output I will give you here. This IECM software suggested to use chemical absorption method. And when I say chemical absorption method, we have to use some chemical solvents. It has suggested monomethylamine as solvent. And there is one more solvent called economine. The commercial name is called FG+. FG+ is nothing but the economine. You can either go for economine or monomethylamine. So these solvents can be used and will react with the CO2 of the flue gas. And the exhaust gases are then finally discharged in the atmosphere after washing. And it will form carbonate, which is a weakly bonded compound. Upon heating, this will release the CO2, which can be stored if you want, or if you want to utilize the CO2, it can also be used. So the output from the IECM software, it provided like it has given like there are 2 units of 125 megawatt. So it has suggested to use for 1 unit monomethylamine and for the other unit FG+, that is economine as the solvent. So when we are going to use this, see this power plant, its installed capacity is 250 megawatt, but it was developing only, unit 1 was developing only 176.7 megawatt, whereas unit 2 was developing 182.1. And the net power output after installing the CCS will be 142 for plant 1 and 154 megawatt for plant 2. And the amount of CO2 emitted every year without CCS is this much. This is the amount of CO2 that is being emitted every year. After incorporating, we can capture 1.995 metric tons of CO2 per year. And this collected can be stored in the Barsingsar mine, unminable coal mine. And as a result of this, what will happen is that we have to spend extra amount to run the plant. So that increase in cost of electricity because of the carbon capture and storage is coming around almost 4 rupees per kilowatt hour. So utilizing the CO2 for different applications, we have also suggested them to utilize the CO2 instead of going for storage. From the feasibility study, we have told them either they can go for storage or they can go for utilizing the CO2. It is always better to utilize the CO2 rather than storing. So if you utilize the CO2, you can generate revenue. There are various ways by which we can utilize the CO2. In the beverage companies, they require CO2, right? Carbonated drinks, they use CO2. So we can supply this, we can, after treatment, we can, after treating the CO2, it can be filled in the cylinder and supplied to beverage companies, and for some pharmaceutical companies also we can supply. And when you perform welding operation, we use shield gas. So as a shield gas, CO2 is used. So this pressurized CO2 can be used as a shield gas. And in the marine industry, for protecting the mariners, we used to have life jacket. That life jacket can be filled with CO2, right? So for filling the life jacket will be filled with gas. So this CO2 can be used. Whatever CO2 that we are going to collect after treatment, this can be filled in the life jackets. And for extinguishing fire, we have CO2 extinguishers, right? So our fire extinguishers can be filled with CO2 that is being collected from the flue gas. And for various chemical industries, for producing methanol, and in the fertilizer plant for producing urea, we can use the CO2 that is being collected from the exhaust gas of the power plants. So these are some of the areas where they can utilize the collected or captured CO2. So by selling them, they can get the profit also. And other applications are, they can also use the CO2 for making baking soda, for making liquid carbon dioxide, that is dry ice. To form dry ice, this CO2 can be used. And if they doesn't want to sell the CO2, they can store very well. They can store in the Barsingsar mine. So coming to the economics aspect of retrofitting this carbon capture and storage plant, their installed capacity is 250 megawatt, but they are able to produce after the power output without CCS. Right now it is 176.7. This is put together both the units. And if you incorporate this CCS, then they can produce only 142.17 megawatt of electric power. The remaining is used for running the CCS plant. And the CO2 emitted per year is this much amount, 2.217 10 power 6 tons. And if you capture using the CCS plant, we can capture 1.995 into 10 power 6 tons of CO2 per year. So if you are going to sell this, in the market price of 1 kg of CO2 is rupees 10. So they can get almost revenue generated will be almost 9 rupees per kilowatt hour of electricity produced. So by selling the CO2, they can get 9 rupees extra for every unit of electricity that is being produced if they are going to sell the CO2. So the increase in the cost of electricity is 4 rupees. We are getting 9 rupees as revenue. So still 5 rupees is advantage, right? So the value that is given in the bracket, this is for Fg plus as solvent. Instead of monomethylamine, if you are going to use Fg plus as solvent, then we will get this much increase in cost of electricity. So coming to the conclusions from the feasibility study carried out at the NLC India Limited, the part of the steam from the boiler has to be diverted to the carbon capture and storage plant. And as a result, the output is going to be reduced. And the CO2, compressed CO2, to run the plant, we require electricity. That has to be from the power plant we are going to tap. And flue gas desulfurization unit is needed for this plant to remove the SOx. And thereby, we have to supply more amount of limestone also. The captured carbon can be treated and reused. Various applications we have listed. And if they are not interested, and we have suggested them to store at the unminable coal mines, which are located near the power plant. So this is the Rajasthan state map. And here we have also considered the earthquake regions. This plant is located in Bikaner district, which comes under not a high damage. This dark red color indicates high damage of earthquake possibility. So this comes under less risk area. So they can store this CO2 in the unminable coal mines. And if you want to refer some of the future carbon capture storage technologies, you can very well refer this website. And coming to the conclusion, with reference to there are two conclusions I have provided. One is general conclusion, other one is a technical conclusion. Technical conclusion is that the coal-based thermal power plant we have to go for chemical absorption method of carbon capture for coal-based thermal power plant. If the power plant is of integrated combined cycle power plant, then physical absorption method is suitable. And if the power plant is a diesel power plant or a gas turbine power plant, then membrane separation method is suitable for capturing the CO2. And to store the carbon, to store the collected carbon, there are various methods available. I have listed the methods that are suitable for India. That means like the places where we have salt water as the groundwater, there we can store. And the places of unminable coal mines, we can store the CO2 that is being captured. And we can go for the oil and gas reservoirs. We can store this. Thereby, we can have enhanced oil recovery from the oil and gas reservoir. And coming to the general conclusion, as an engineer, if you ask us, then what we'll say, we require CO2 is completely mandatory in order to protect the environment. And if you think as a human being, then afforestation is the best method to protect the environment. That means you have to plant trees. And we have to remember very well that we have to live in coordination with the nature. Else we have to face the fury of the nature, or we have to face the natural calamities and natural disasters such as global warming, tsunami, super cyclone, El Nino, forest fire, Wuhan virus, etc. Right? So the bottom line is that no technology can replace nature. That should be taken care. And with lots of hope, let us abide by the laws of the nature and make the earth habitable. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you, sir.
Sir, excellent.